You're not too much. They're just not used to someone who refuses to dim their light. Listen, if you've ever felt out of place in a room full of surface-level talk, if you've ever had people glare at you for asking deeper questions, if your silence unsettles them more than their noise unsettles you, then this message is for you. Because chosen ones like you weren't wired for shallow waters. Your mind was built to dive deep, your soul tuned to higher frequencies. And every time you don't play along with their scripts, you're not being rude, you're being real, you're being powerful, you're being you. They don't know what to do with someone who sees through the performance. They don't know how to stand next to someone who thinks clearly, feels deeply, and lives with purpose. And that's exactly why your presence is so necessary. You shake things just by existing. Keep shaking. Let's talk about why their offense isn't your problem, and how your intellect is the exact gift this world needs, even if it makes the small-minded uncomfortable. Some people can't stand how you carry truth like breath in your lungs. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. Your thoughts move through planes they've never visited, and the way you hold silence instead of sinking into chatter leaves them uneasy. That discomfort they feel, it's not your problem. It's their proof that you don't belong in their box. There's a game they like to play, and they think it's harmless. But you know better. The moment you refuse to participate, the temperature changes. Their eyes shift, their words stiffen, and what sounded like politeness now feels like a script meant to shrink you. It's not about connection, it's about containment, a test, a quiet demand for you to step down from your altitude and speak in a tone that won't remind them how much they've settled. They dress it up as friendly banter, a question about the weather, a headline about a stranger. But underneath, it's an attempt to make you betray your depth. Each surface-level prompt is a hook, trying to pull you into a space that doesn't have room for your awareness. They're not curious, they're cornering. They need to prove you're ordinary, to fold your edges so they feel safe in their flat world. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $20 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. But you weren't designed for that. The frequency you operate on doesn't allow for reduction. It hums too loud, too clear. What they call awkwardness, when you don't join their loop, is really your clarity refusing to be dimmed. You're not difficult, you're in tune. Your refusal to dilute your thoughts is not rebellion, it's preservation. They've built rituals around this. Meetings that never ask for insight. Gatherings where truth is a liability. Roles where conformity is the requirement, not creativity. These spaces reward agreement, not awareness. They pass off emotional sedation as social grace, and when you challenge that, they mark you as the problem. But their rejection is a gift in disguise. It confirms that your mind is still your own. What they fear is not your voice. It's what your silence reveals. It unmasks the emptiness in their exchanges. They can't understand that your pauses aren't hesitation. They're intentional acts of resistance. Where they settle for recycled thoughts, you crave ideas that pull the soul into expansion. Where they chat, you seek to converse. Where they network, you want to connect. They've made it seem like shallowness is a survival skill, as though dulling your edges is the price of belonging. But you know that anything that costs you your consciousness isn't worth the entry. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to awaken. And if that means walking alone in rooms that echo with empty words, so be it. Because your mind is not a tool for appeasement. It's not a mirror for others' comfort. It's a lighthouse, a signal, a force that calls to others like you. Those who feel the weight of false smiles and empty phrases in their bones. Your clarity disrupts. Your presence reminds. You are proof that intellect and authenticity can still exist in a world obsessed with performance. You were never meant to trade your knowing for approval. And those who truly see you, they'll never ask you to. Some people aren't just ahead of the curve, they are the curve. There's a level of thought that can't be boxed into predictable pleasantries or dulled by idle chatter. And when that kind of mind walks into a room that trades depth for comfort, tension rises like static before a lightning strike. What they call antisocial is often the instinct to protect sacred mental ground. It's not about snubbing others, it's about guarding your inner fire from being smothered by triviality. Your mind doesn't drift, it accelerates. While others are flipping through surface-level scripts, you're running simulations of meaning, zooming out, and seeing frameworks they didn't even know existed. They don't resent your silence, they fear what it means. Because when someone doesn't join the usual noise, they become a mirror. Not the kind that reflects appearance, but the kind that reflects truth. And some people can't stand to see what they've settled into. That irritation you sense when you speak clearly, when you introduce a thought that hasn't been copy-pasted from mass consciousness. That's not your imagination. It's a reflex. The mind that has never been challenged grows brittle. And your insight, it breaks the illusion that shallow waters run deep. You bring oxygen into rooms that have been recycling the same stale ideas for years, but instead of breathing it in, they choke on it. And then they pretend you're the one who's out of line. They throw out phrases like, lighten up, or stop over-analyzing, not because you're wrong, but because your presence forces a confrontation with the parts of themselves they've long ignored. They've set up their lives like furnished stage sets. Each conversation has its cue cards, each moment a rehearsed exchange. But then you show up unscripted, and suddenly the play falls apart. Your presence disrupts the social spell, and they respond by trying to shrink you back into character. They disguise their discomfort in jokes. They question your vocabulary like it's a costume. They cut off your ideas mid-thought, not because they're uninterested, but because they're overwhelmed. They weren't prepared for someone who reads the room and rewrites it in real time. And still, you're asked to be the one to adjust, to play along, to simplify, to smile through spiritual suffocation. But you've done that before. You've worn the mask, lowered the volume, softened the edge, and all it did was silence the very thing that made you alive. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the awareness you represent. They're rejecting the fact that someone out there didn't settle, that someone found a way to stay awake in a world built on autopilot, and that someone, this time, is sitting right in front of them. Because when you speak, they hear the sound of everything they ignored echoing back. When you pause, they feel the presence of everything they've avoided rising up to meet them. Your clarity isn't welcome because it's rare. It's resisted because it's real. And the thing is, you were never meant to be palatable. You were meant to spark, stir, disrupt, not in anger, but in alignment. You weren't designed to keep the peace that buries truth. You were made to illuminate the quiet corners, to speak the sentence that stops the ritual, to bring the kind of presence that can't be absorbed into the usual script. Let them call it whatever they want. The labels they use are more about their comfort than your character. You're not difficult, you're different. And different is the signal that the system can't process. Let that stand. Let it be loud. Because you didn't come here to blend in. You came here to show what brilliance looks like when it refuses to fold. There are those who walk into a room and immediately distort the gravity of it, not by speaking, but simply by existing. Their presence causes invisible fractures in the social scaffolding because their inner clarity makes the collective fog unbearable. They carry a frequency that doesn't require explanation. It vibrates through the cracks of shallow expectation and reveals the hollowness beneath. In a world addicted to external nods of approval, they move by an inner compass most people don't even know exists. They aren't defiant. They're disinterested in the games others still think are worth playing. Where others chase affirmation through emotional choreography, they sit still, anchored in something deeper, older, and infinitely more honest. It's not that they ignore people, it's that they bypass the need to perform for people whose applause isn't rooted in truth. They don't need validation from systems built on flattery, envy, or consensus. Their fuel comes from alignment, not attention. Now is the moment to share God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube. With a donation of $100 or more, you can actively participate in His divine mission and contribute to His greater plan. Every offering you make reflects the boundless generosity of God, and I trust it will return to you abundantly, far exceeding your hopes. Always remember, His protection and blessing accompany your every step and every act of giving. You are a vital part of His sacred design. You are strong and radiant, steadfast, like His mighty rock. Experience God's miracles. Feel the rewards of your generosity deep within your soul and shine your light with boldness and faith. May you be richly blessed, and may the light of the Lord continually guide your journey. So when the room shifts, when light conversation turns to awkward silence or sideways glances, it's not accidental, it's recognition, the kind that stings, not because harm was intended, but because truth showed up uninvited. They've stopped talking about the weather, not because they're arrogant, but because the sky is no longer their ceiling. They've outgrown the need to discuss things that were never meant to matter. And those still attached to the script, they feel it, deeply, instinctively. And they panic, not loudly, but subtly. They try to mask the discomfort in playful jabs or group-approved sarcasm. Why so serious? You think too much. But beneath every comment is the echo of a mind trying to protect itself from a mirror it didn't expect to face. Because when someone stands in their truth without asking for permission, it disrupts, it unravels illusions. It makes previously unquestioned norms look like costumes at a masquerade party where no one remembers what real faces look like. The discomfort isn't rooted in hostility, it's rooted in exposure. Because if one person can live with such mental sovereignty, then others must ask themselves why they haven't tried. And that question is too dangerous for most to entertain. So instead, they resort to subtle reprimands. They label the deep thinker as difficult, intense, too much. They celebrate the mundane because it feels safe. But safety has never built wisdom. Comfort has never birthed clarity. They need everyone to fit into the same tight mental corridors because spacious thinking threatens the entire architecture of their beliefs. When someone refuses to shrink, it reminds others how much they've folded themselves just to be accepted. And when you refuse to lower your gaze, when you remain seated in depth while they swim in distraction, it becomes obvious. You were never trying to escape the room. You were just never trapped by it to begin with. This is the quiet rebellion of the aware. Not a rebellion of noise, but of presence. Not in resistance, but in refusal to pretend. It doesn't seek to win arguments or convert minds. It simply stands unbothered in full spectrum consciousness, while the rest scramble to adjust their lenses. And they may never understand you. That's okay. They were never meant to. You're not here to be legible to the ordinary. You're here to be a reminder that something beyond ordinary is possible. Some of you carry minds that were never designed for containment. You didn't choose to live on the surface. You were born wired to seek what lies beneath. While others find comfort in the familiar hum of routine dialogue, your awareness scans beneath the syllables, searching for truth that doesn't fear scrutiny. That's what separates you. And that separation, though unspoken, is deeply felt by those around you. You've done your best to adapt. You've smiled through hours of scripted chatter. You've tried to find meaning in conversations that drift like fog over still water. Talk of celebrity antics, regurgitated headlines, meaningless updates disguised as social bonding. You've nodded through discussions that feel like reruns of a show you never agreed to watch, all for the sake of appearing normal. And every time, something in you recoils, as if your inner self is shrinking to fit a chair that was never built for your frame. Pretending to care about trivialities exacts a cost. It doesn't just drain your time, it fractures your integrity. Your mind knows how far it can stretch, how much it can hold, how deeply it can dive. And yet you compress it, again and again, to squeeze into the narrow emotional alleys others call connection. It's not that you think you're better, it's that you know there's more. And you're punished for knowing. You feel it, the strain. Not just mental exhaustion, but a kind of energetic depletion. Because every moment spent simplifying your thoughts into bite-sized cliches for their comfort is a moment your soul could have spent expanding, exploring, and aligning with a greater truth. You weren't made to feign interest in surface-level noise. You're built for synthesis, for signal, for structure beyond what can be seen. Trying to slow your cognition for shallow engagement is like putting a jet engine in reverse just to taxi with bicycles. It's not just inefficient, it's damaging. And what's the payoff? Acceptance by people who shrink when you grow, who wince when you question, who flee when depth enters the room. Is that really belonging? Or is it a form of exile masked by fake smiles and social points? They've cleverly repackaged dismissal as etiquette. They've taught people that staying on safe topics is maturity, that passion for ideas is arrogance, that asking why too often means you're making others uncomfortable. But you know better. You feel the difference between being polite and being silenced. And so, they close off when you open up. They label your depth as intensity. They call your pattern recognition paranoia. They mistake your multidimensional perception for overcomplication. They're not threatened by what you say. They're terrified of what it implies. Because if your mind is possible, then so is theirs. And if you chose to rise, what does that say about their decision to stay? They don't want to confront that. So they minimize, they redirect, they shame, all to avoid facing the mirror you carry without saying a word. But you don't exist to make others feel safe in their limitations. You're here to remember your own design. You're here to stretch into your full range. You're here to think like a galaxy and speak like a storm. You weren't made for the echo chamber of comfort. You were made to rattle the foundations of what they thought was truth. So let them mislabel your mind. Let them call your questions too much. Let them call your voice disruptive. That's how you'll know it's working. They never wanted equilibrium. What they've built is a structure of control, thinly veiled as civility, polished into decorum and disguised as polite norms. But beneath the smiling nods and well-timed chuckles lies something else, a quiet demand that you dim your thoughts to keep the room comfortable. When they say, "Let's keep things light," what they mean is, don't make us feel the weight of what we're pretending not to see. When they sigh and whisper, "This isn't the time or place," what they're saying is, don't make us face what we've chosen to ignore. They've turned avoidance into etiquette. Steer clear of the heavy stuff. It's code for don't shine a light on our intellectual laziness. In one breath, they praise critical thinking, and in the next, they exile it from every dinner table, every gathering, every conversation that might rock the boat they've anchored in shallow water. They've trained themselves to wince at complexity like it's impolite. But you never signed that contract. You're not bothered by depth. You were built for it. You weren't wired to stay on the surface and pretend it's the whole ocean. The problem is, your very presence reminds them they could have gone deeper too. And that's a truth many can't bear, because you don't just speak differently, you see differently. And your seeing unravels the narrative they've spent years stitching together. They act like it's about your tone, your timing, your intensity, but it's not. It's about the mirror you become. Every time you speak from a place they've never accessed, they have to face the fact that they had a choice and chose ease. They chose what was familiar. They chose not to evolve. This is why they flinch. Not because you're arrogant, not because you're rude, but because you're the walking reminder that expansion was always possible, and they declined. And let's be honest, you've tried. You've endured the forced laughter. You've nodded at recycled opinions that collapsed under the weight of your silence. You've engaged in more "how's the weather" conversations than any soul should have to. And each time, a little part of your brilliance folded inward, just to keep the peace. But peace isn't the same as alignment, and what they call social harmony is really just obedience to a mental ceiling you were never meant to crawl under. The cost of pretending is brutal. It's not just tiring, it's damaging. It forces you to betray the pace your thoughts naturally run at. You're not overcomplicating. You're operating at your natural rhythm. They're just used to everyone slowing down to make them feel comfortable. Let that end today. You don't need to offer explanations they can't translate. You don't need to dilute insight into sound bites. You don't need to simulate mediocrity, so they'll stop calling you intense. You don't owe anyone the performance of pretending not to know what you know. Your mind is sacred ground, and it's not a theme park for those who only want souvenirs. This is about sovereignty, the kind they'll never understand because they've never left the gates of consensus. You're not here to pacify, you're here to remember and remind. There are others like you, thinkers who don't just process, they synthesize, seekers who don't just ask questions, they create new frameworks, builders of thought who don't stop at knowledge but push until they reach the edge of understanding and then ask, what's beyond? Those are your people. Find them, build with them, speak with the ones who don't ask you to shrink before you open your mouth. And finally, stop waiting for permission. No one who's afraid of their own mind will ever give it to you. Operate fully, speak clearly, think freely. Don't apologize for depth. Don't translate brilliance into banality just so someone else won't feel small. You're not responsible for their stagnation. You are responsible for your own expansion. So choose it, daily, relentlessly, unapologetically. Every time the world tries to shrink you into a shape that fits its design, and you resist, you're sending out a frequency only the awake can hear. Not because you're loud, but because your silence refuses to bend. You're not defying them out of rebellion. You're simply unwilling to step out of alignment just to be accepted in a room built for lower voltage. Your thinking doesn't fit the mold because it was never meant to, and that alone is enough to shake the ground they thought was stable. This isn't about debate, it's about presence. When you decline the invitation to play small, when you withhold your energy from conversations meant to dilute your insight, you establish a new gravitational field, one where intellect isn't sacrificed for harmony, and truth isn't softened for applause. You don't need to prove anything. Your clarity speaks without needing to shout. The power is in what you no longer respond to, and it's contagious. Dear brothers and sisters, may the peace of God fill your hearts today. I come to remind you of a profound truth. Our lives are firmly established in God's divine purpose, untouched by the fleeting worries of this world. As Scripture tells us, give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. Luke 6:38. Like the mighty oak whose roots are planted deep in rich soil, our foundation is anchored in God's eternal truth. Every move we make, every stand we take, is upheld by His enduring strength. Today, you have the opportunity to participate in this divine blessing. By clicking the Super Thank You button and offering a gift of $50, you will sow into a harvest that will return to you many times over in God's abundant grace. One mind choosing not to dim makes room for another to stay lit. One soul holding steady in its wisdom gives courage to the next. You're not changing people by arguing with them. You're changing the atmosphere by being immovable. When your thoughts are no longer edited to match their volume, when your standards stop shape-shifting for crowd control, you've already started the revolution, not with force, but with refusal. You don't need to save anyone. You just need to stop muting your brilliance to soothe their discomfort. Let their confusion be their own. Let their disapproval fall like rain on stone. What you're doing, simply being fully lit in a dim world, is the most radical thing of all. They've constructed systems that depend on people pretending not to see, on people agreeing to be less than what they are. And when you pull your agreement from that matrix, you cause a glitch. Their framework trembles, not because you attacked it, but because you opted out. And suddenly, what was hidden becomes visible, and what was tolerated starts to feel unbearable. The future doesn't belong to the ones who blend. It belongs to those who stop apologizing for seeing clearly, to those who no longer lower their gaze just to avoid making someone else feel seen, to the ones who keep their minds intact, even when the cost is solitude. Because let's be clear, this world wasn't built for minds like yours. It was built to contain them. So stop asking it to make room. Stop waiting for the environment to change before you expand. The more you take up space in thought, the more you clear space in the world. The moment you stop translating yourself for their understanding, you freed yourself from their limitations. They might call you too much. That's fine. Let them whisper it from their predictable lanes while you continue building roads into terrain they've never dared to enter. This is what they fear, that you'll keep going without needing their validation, without bending your truth to their thresholds, that you'll keep walking at your pace, thinking at your depth, reaching at your height, that you'll keep refusing to shrink for the sake of fitting in. Let them. Because while they're busy adjusting themselves to stay inside the lines, you'll be too busy redrawing the map. Let them be unsettled. You've got better things to do then apologize for the size of your mind.